All right, it is 10 away from 8. We've been talking a lot this morning about ways to boost the economy in a post-COVID world, and one of the ideas that's been floating around is to reopen the borders to our international students. How hard could this possibly be, and will it put our health at risk? Joining us now is the New Zealand Initiative Chief Economist, Eric Crampton. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So if I was to come to you and I was to say, look, I've got a proposition to make us $1.5 billion in the next 6 months in the second half of this year, you would say, sure, come at me, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it seems a pretty obvious move that the government should be taking. Back in February, the universities were asking to have the ability to bring foreign students in under self-quarantine provisions similar to those that Kiwis coming in would use. Of course, it was basically impossible to give effect to that at that point, but it's now several months later, and we've got a real opportunity here. New Zealand's COVID-free status means that international education for the universities, the tertiary sector, and even secondary schools, it isn't just a get back to where we were scenario, which is like a dream for every other part of the economy. It's we've got a real ability to grow here, because if you look to America, the University of California system, the California state system, they've all gone to online learning. Other universities are shifting to really disrupted ways of teaching. New Zealand could be offering a real university experience for students from places that we'd never have an easy time drawing students from otherwise. We could be marketing in the US, say, come to New Zealand, spend 2 weeks in quarantine, and have a real university experience instead of sitting at home doing online learning with the equivalent of Zoom.
Let's really send this home to people. Domestic students pay about $7,000 a year for tertiary education. These guys pay $24,000 for the same privilege. So they have been described as cash cows for us here in New Zealand. Who would pay for the self-quarantine?
I think the universities would be very happy to pay for it themselves out of the fees that are charged. And really, that should have us thinking a little bit more broadly. So long as quarantine can be set up on a user pays basis, why limit it, right? So long as facilities can be proven safe and that they're monitored, and penalty of deportation for breaches of quarantine to keep everybody safe, because you lose all of the benefits we've gained out of lockdown, as well as all of the economic gains that you'd have from being able to offer that COVID-free experience if we let messes come through. Of course, it should be user pays, and I don't think anybody in the tertiary sector would be complaining about that.
Has the government given any indication at this stage that they're keen on the idea, that they'll look at it?
Well, we'd put out a short research note on this a couple of weeks ago, and initially the Minister of Education sounded pretty optimistic about it and enthusiastic. Things scaled back a little bit from there with Minister Robertson putting a bit of cold water on it until maybe November or January. But I think some of that is missing the importance of the timing here. So in North America, semesters start in August. If we're trying to hit that kind of market and encourage students going to top American schools to come to New Zealand instead, we need to be able to be open for around July to be able to tell them that they've got that facility in place. Similarly, with the secondary schools, somewhere around 22,000 international students come and study in our secondary schools every year. They pay host families somewhere around $250 a week for room and board and some of the acculturation. That's real money in the pockets of a lot of families that helps them through and provides a really interesting experience for their own kids, right? So you've got those international connections that get built. The timing really matters, though. If we don't start hitting those semester deadlines, we've got missed a window that semester.
Eric, It seems an obvious one to me, and if the universities are willing to pay for it and they have security on the doors to make sure that these guys aren't breaking quarantine, the potential for at least a $1.5 billion pie, slice of a pie, sounds pretty appealing to me. As Eric has said, the window is closing fast. By July, really, they need to have an indication as to whether we are going to open up to international students or not. New Zealand Initiative Chief Economist Eric Crampton on the show this morning. It seems like a good idea to me.
I think it is a good idea. My one concern I have, though, I've got people who work with foreign students and stuff, and they desperately want them back, is that we had that spike in cases of racism when COVID first arrived here. So I just want to make sure, and it was pretty ugly, it was pretty brutal, it was aimed at a lot of people from Asian countries. I hope when they bring these students in, and that doesn't happen again, that we're all cool and accepting of it, and that we have things in place to protect them in case there is any sort of that kind of behaviour again if we have a wee spike. They don't want them to be an easy target.
That fear, I don't think it's, I'm hearing you, but I don't think that fear should be a reason why we don't make this happen.
Yeah.
The reason why it won't happen is because it doesn't fall under the blanket coverage. It involves empowering people. It involves trusting people.
Yes.
And that is not the modus operandi of the current people in charge.
Yeah. And if it was to put the reluctance is because if they do anything to jeopardise the gains that we've made, if they do anything to jeopardise the international reputation we now have of 5 days of 0 new cases, whatever it is, they're going to be very reluctant.
I've seen this on the sports field, and it's batsmen who start protecting their batting average. They're not of much value to you and the team any longer.
They're a one-man team then, aren't they?
That's tremendously hypocritical because that was me towards the end of my career.
And from experience.
You're not a good team player any longer. You are protecting this batting average that you're so very proud of. And the way that you're performing may in fact be counterproductive to what the team needs at that point in time.
But you understand it because it's human nature. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good sporting analogies, always useful. I have no idea what batting average means.
Nod and
3
smile,
minutes
nod
away
and
from
smile.
8.